Hey everybody, welcome back to, this is episode number 3, second in the series for MSPs. Hopefully I'm getting my math right here. And because if you saw the first one, if you did you not see the first one? Go back and watch the first one. In fact, go back, watch the kickoff, and then watch the first one that we did for MSPs. This one is the second and last specific one to MSPs. And this one I think is going to be really important because I know that a lot of MSPs struggle with hiring people in general, and hiring and deciding how to pay your first salesperson is probably one of the hardest things that a technician turned entrepreneur turned growing MSP has ever had to deal with. Well, that and contracts maybe. So welcome again, Tim Coach. Tim, how you doing today?
Fantastic, right? We're getting, it's always as you move through the week, you're one day closer to the weekend, which I love the weekend because it's only 2 days until I get to come back to work.
Yeah. Now, weekend, it's interesting. We talked about this yesterday, or in the last episode about switching from working in the business to working on the business. And the same kind of goes for your work life and your personal life. You need to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And I tell you, last weekend was Labor Day weekend, and I turned it off and I smoked some meat.
Oh, you can't. I live in Kansas City, so I can appreciate that. That's that. But see, what's funny though is like, okay, now we're getting into a generational debate. The turning it off. So people will be all the time like, you talk about going on vacation, and I honestly do a real vacation once every couple of years. Because of how I travel, I can take a day here or there, and that's usually how I recharge. But it's my identity is my work, right? So I do enjoy working, but you're absolutely right. Being able to wind down, being able to focus on family time, smoking some meat, maybe going to a ball game, something like that is all critical because you still have to recharge who you are, which I think is important for the subject we're going to talk about today, because now we're talking about people that are at the point that their hats have become too heavy to switch them, and they need to hire somebody else kind of to wear that other hat so that they can figure out a way that they can recharge themselves and not burn out as they're growing.
Yep. Now, before we get started on this, because this is something that, like I said in the beginning, I know a lot of MSPs struggle with because sales is not their strong suit. And I know a lot of them have been told, and it's been recommended to them, that they should try and do sales for as long as they can because nobody else sells their business. And because we're doing a service business, right? Nobody sells their business better than the owner. What is your thought on that?
I mean, listen, we both know technical people are not salespeople. They're doing it out of necessity, right? So one of the great things about growing a team is you hire that team to do the things that you suck at, right? That's what makes great teams. It's I'm not hiring someone to do the things that I'm good at. Otherwise, why would I keep doing the tech work, or why would I keep running the company, and why would I not just hire someone to do the tech work, right? Like we're talking about really kind of that first move as a growing MSP, and the argument of, do I go tech or do I go sales? And the reality of it is a technical owner in MSP can handle more technical work. But if they don't like doing sales, if they're not good at sales, if it makes them physically ill, which it does a lot of these people, they're just good at covering it up, right? Then it's pretty obvious that your first hire or your ad hoc hire, your part-time hire should be a salesperson to do the thing that they're good at to free you up to do the stuff that you're good at.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that, by the way. I think there is a little bit of truth to the fact that owners have a certain mentality that comes through. But at the end of the day, if you're bad at sales, you're bad at sales, and it's actually hindering you rather than helping you.
Well, and that's the thing too, is you of course nobody cares as much about your business as you do, right? I mean, that goes without saying. The point being is bringing that first position on that helps you be better at your business, right? Like that's where we're going. Is we're making a strategic decision on hiring an individual that's going to help us, not someone that's doing it. And the reality of it is as much as you, the owner, cares about your business, salespeople are naturally coin driven, right? That is their nature. Now, they may want to be involved in the tech, right? We all agree that if you know and you love a product, it's way easier to sell or talk about that product, right? There's the argument out there that a true salesperson can sell anything, right? But there's a hard argument to be had to say the owner cares more about their business than the salesperson cares more about their pocket. If you find that right combination and they're being incentivized correctly, then that's a good relationship for both people, because the salesperson knows they got to sell and the owner knows that they got to keep up with the sales so that the whole thing is successful.
Yep. And we're going to get to compensation a little bit later in the show, but I really want to start out with what are let's call them warning signs that you should be really considering hiring that first salesperson.
I think if you're a full tech side of the company, no matter if there's one or two of you, it's technical work isn't getting done because sales work is in the way. Or it's you're no longer growing because you don't have anything in the pipeline. Like, whatever you're not doing today for sales is a 60 or a 90-day recovery rate. If I have a lead today, then I've got something to work for 60 to 90 days.
Yep.
If I don't have that lead today and I don't have any leads this week, guess what? My pipeline now has a hole. It has a gap. So if you're at the spot where you're not keeping up with technical work, or you have no new pipeline, or you got these giant gaps in your pipeline, that's a really good indicator that you need to be looking at a salesperson.
Yep. And by the way, going back to the first MSP session on sales funnels, that's why it's important to regularly, consistently work on your business rather than just in your business. Because if you're not paying attention to that sales funnel, to that sales pipeline, you are going to get those gaps in there. And the bigger those gaps get, the longer it takes you to recover.
Very much so. It's whatever activity you're not doing today creates a gap in your pipeline, period.
Okay, so that's some of the warning signs of when you should start thinking about hiring your first salesperson. What are some of the things that before you even come up with a job description and a formal role and start looking for people, what are some of the things that you need to have in place before, or some of the things you need to figure out before you actually start looking to hire that person?
I think the biggest thing you got to figure out is capacity. What is your capacity to bring new clients on? What is your capacity to do that while keeping them happy, right? That's critical. People will say white glove. I don't think that's white glove. I think bringing a client on and their onboarding being a good experience is a basic standard, right? So understanding the technical capabilities you have and where you can grow to. I think understanding financially where you are with your company, right? Your budget, your P&L, your balance sheet. How are those looking? Are you at the point that you can financially bring someone on? And then what you got to have is you got to have some system in place that salesperson is going to follow at some level, right? Because hopefully you're bringing in someone experienced enough that they can help with that process, but not too much take and not enough give, right? But it's I think those three things. One, do you have the capacity to bring them on? Two, does your financials in the place that you can bring them on? And three, what I like to call it, what does success look like?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to bring on your first salesperson. What does them being successful in the role look like? And is that realistic?
Yep. And I think there's a lot of math there that you can actually do to create concrete answers, right? Because you know that you're going to have to pay them something. You can look up what standard pay rates are, right? We just talked about how your pipeline is going to take 60 to 90 days to start converting. So you know that you're going to have to pay this person probably for 3 months with no extra revenue coming in. So are you prepared for that? The other part of it, and you hinted at it, I think, is do you have the capacity in terms of technicians to handle the amount of business that a full-time salesperson should be bringing in? And so that's another consideration, again, financially, because you may have to hire another technician that you don't necessarily have work for yet until, they're actually here for almost 6 months. That salesperson is there. So a lot of different things that, yes, it can be expensive. Although I know in the last episode, we said not to use that word anymore, but just a lot of things that you can actually get out a calculator and figure out and go, okay, I need to start socking away an extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, whatever it is, to meet that goal, so that in 6 months, I'm ready to hire that new rep. And 60 to 90 days after that, I'm ready to hire my next technician. Does that sound about right?
I think that does sound about right, because it's one of those things where all processes and procedures have to be scalable. And the way you start out at scalable is building it right from the start, not building it right now when you need something. Right. So I think you're spot on with that as far as like where those goes and how you should be thinking about this particular action. Because you're right. It's new salespersons are a long-term play. That's not a short-term return. They may have a couple in the pocket that they'll bring out right out of the gate. And you'll be like, oh, this person's so great. This was the best hire ever done. And then they got 90 days of nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, and you're going to lose that belief and that hope. But you have to stay on course knowing that you're going to have somewhere a 60 to 90 day gap for this salesperson to ramp their activity up.
Yep. And then I know that as soon as I said you're going to have to pull $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 out and put it aside to be able to afford that salesperson in 6 months, these MSPs are going, what? I don't have that kind of profitability. And I'm like, well, then your profitability is wrong, and you need to revisit your profitability to make room for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, right? Like that's something, once again, you should be looking at the math and the data to guide you in where you're going and what you're doing. With that's this on the very far end of this is M&A. And it's pretty easy for those of us that do the M&A thing to see the people that didn't do the scalable and the math up front. And they're like, I don't have that to put away. And it doesn't take a genius to read a balance sheet and realize that you're making your house payment out of your company. That's not how that works. Mm-hmm. Nor is there any value there for the person that's looking to acquire you. So, it's one of those things that you got to do it right from the start, or at least clean it up as you go to make sure the math is mathing when you're ready to pull that trigger.
Well, and so many people think of just a cost plus type of model or things like that. Part of your profitability is the future, and you've got to pay for the future in advance. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. If you're going to invest in your business to get a significant growth rate, that is something that you're just going to have to do.
No, you're right. And the good thing is there's ways to start out without that full-blown hire, right? There are entities out there, and this is where you're working on your best or on your business, right? You're vetting through these people. Like, look, all of those that have been doing this for a couple of decades, trust me, we've hired every lead gen company that's out there, and we continually see printer companies, and we continue to see voice companies, and all these people that don't meet the qualifications that we gave the lead generation people to do. Now, there are a handful out there that do offer a boutique or custom type experience where they're making those relationships, right? They're building the relationship on their side with both the MSP and the clients, and can waver on those kind of relationships to help you start out. So that's certainly a way to get started early on at a lower cost. Eventually, though, you're going to have to pull the trigger on hiring a salesperson that's dedicated to your company, because as much as, and I'm a fan of ad hoc, I am a fan of using vendors for other things, but eventually you want that person to be in-house because they're solely focused on your business.
Right. And there's a certain amount of, because it's a service business again, there's a certain amount of culture that being in the business, they absorb that culture and they understand more about how the business is run and the type of experience that you're trying to deliver through that service, that if they're not immersed in it, they just don't get it. And if they don't get it, they can't project it.
Correct. And it's hard for people to understand, I think, sometimes when you're talking about a salesperson, like, and not that we're ready for the compensation conversation, like how you get it and how they get paid and how to set them up for success, right? Because that's really one of the things is as the owner, your relationship with them is very important. But part of that relationship is staying out of their way.
Yeah.
Like it's don't hire someone to come in, especially if you're hiring like an experienced person. If you're hiring someone that is coming in, to use an old term, they're bringing a Rolodex, or they have their own book of business, and that's one thing, right? But if you hire anybody and your skill set or your nature is to micromanage that person, that is not the person you need. You have a whole other bunch of stuff to work on. You need to hire someone that doesn't need micromanagement, that can keep you up to date, that you can have a good relationship with, and is honest and is open. I've had a bad week. I had a bad day. I had whatever the deal is, right? And then that relationship will help you not micromanage them, which will help you to continue to work on and in your business. And experienced salespeople don't want to be micromanaged. I'll tell you that now.
No, because they've been successful doing it the way they do it. And, I wanted to bring up something because what you said a few minutes ago reminded me of this. You said, number one, they're coin operated, right? Which is very important to a salesperson. If you get a good salesperson, they're absolutely coin operated. The problem that sometimes I see happen is MSPs don't actually realize how much business that salesperson has to bring in on a monthly basis to keep that coin operation going. And so that's another math thing that you got to figure out before you start hiring somebody.
Right. So, and there's two things there. So I very much used to be the person that when I hired a salesperson, I wanted, basically the couple, 3 kids, a couple of Beamers, and a new mortgage. Like, that is a motivated salesperson. Then on the other side now, you got these younger people that aren't as engaged as us older folks are in, the being tied up and early on in their lives, but they're still go-getters. Right now, what we see a lot of younger driven people that are trying to, for lack of a better term, make their fortunes early on before they get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a critical aspect when you're looking at a salesperson, like, you need that coin operation, right? That is someone that they have clear set goals in their mind of what they want to accomplish. Now, that feeds into the second part of your conversation, which is understanding what you got to bring in to, and I'm not even talking money. I'm talking about leads. What you got to bring in to keep that person, to keep the company going, to eventually turn into money, right? And that's, as you and I both know, that's a mathematical program.
Yep.
You want one sale every month. That means you got to have 10 people that are qualified in the pipeline, which means you probably got to have about 30 to 50 that are in the process, but they're not quite fully qualified, which means that 30 and 50, you probably need about 200 that you're just touching.
Yep.
Right. So if your goal is, I need $5,000 in sales every month. Okay, what does that look like? Is that one $5,000 client? You think that's good until that one $5,000 client leaves and that's hurt you. Or is that to 2,500? What combination is that? And then how many leads do you need on the back end, on the very top end of funnel to actually find that $5,000 a month?
Yep. And I do want to clarify something here, because sometimes coin operated can come off as a derogatory term. It is absolutely not in this case. You want your salespeople to be coin operated, because if you design things properly, if you put the process in place and the math works, the more money they make, the more money you make, and it's a win-win relationship.
Like, I will tell every business owner, and I have for years, if it hurts you to write that commission check on a monthly basis, then that is the spot you want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
If every time you're writing that commission check, it makes you tense up just a little bit, then you've got the right person. You've got the right person.
Yep. It's like, being scared or being ambitious about having to pay $1 million in income tax, right? If you're paying $1 million in income tax, you're making way more than $1 million.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? Is it's one of those things where the more painful the salesperson makes it for you, the better off you are. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a conversation which may be, I think we're on like episode 2.2 of probably like 50 or 60. And there's a conversation way down the road that probably leans a little more in favor of the business and a little less in favor of the salesperson. And that's where you get to these points where you've had these long-standing clients, and really the only thing that the salesperson is doing at this point is maybe QBRs. Maybe they're touching them once a month, so once or like 12 times a year, or maybe it's 6 times a year because they're also doing QBRs. But the primary load of the relationship with that client is now been taken over the years of the MSP, right? Because they're not going to call the sales guy and fire the sales guy because he sucks at doing sales. They're going to fire the MSP because the technical aspect is not going correct. So there is an argument way out there that says, okay, now the comp plan on the QBRs and the touching once a month is different than new sales. And they're obviously different comp plans for both of those, right? There's hunters and there's farmers. I had a guy for years, like his only job, we used to call him a caveman, right? Your job is to go out and knock it on the head, drag it back, and leave it at the cave for us to process. That's it. Yep. And that's how his comp plan was set up. But he had an aggressive comp plan because he knew it and he agreed to it. And that guy was the best. But he wasn't a farmer. He didn't want to nurture. He didn't want to touch them afterwards. So you have to, like, their mentality and how they operate in their world, you have to take that on as well.
Yep. So that is actually a good segue into compensation. And because one of the things you got to do is you got to figure out how you're going to pay these people. And again, we talked about how they're coin operated. And so the way you design the compensation plan is going to directly drive their behavior. So, Tim, what are some of the better incentives that you've seen or better plans put in place for compensating an MSP sales rep?
So let me start off with this. That's a positive and negative thing. You can drive their attitude and their work and everything else very positively, or you can drive it negatively.
Mm-hmm.
Now, early on, right, it may make sense to bring in somebody on a salary basis, right, where it's, as I'm coming in, and then maybe that means you give up 5% of your company to this person, right? And you're on a 3-year investment. I'm going to give you 5. This is going to work out in the long run, but I don't really know about the commission thing. So let me bring you in as a salary, give you some of the company, and then let's grow it together. And year 1 or year 2, okay, now let's negotiate you to where you have less of the annual salary and you're being more promoted on, you're getting those commission checks.
Yep.
Right. And then there's the one where it's like the proof's in the pudding. So you got a low base and you're going to be on a commission rate of here's how much you make. And then that is all over the place. What are you wanting to drive as a company? That's key. If you're trying to drive new business, then you award more on new business than re-signing a contract. If you're trying to stabilize your client base, maybe your base is a little bit more and your commission is not so much because they're really there as a customer service rep. And their main goal and their main drive is that constant interaction and the constant touching of the clients. So as far as which one to do, it's very broad, but it depends on what you're trying to do. If it's new business and you're small, then the best way to allocate that, and every finance person out there will love it, you give them an annual salary and you give them a percentage of the company. And it's that way that they only win long term. Right. If they do their part. If it's someone that comes in and they know their weight and they know that they can make just a giant commission check, then you give them a low base and then you put them on the program that offers them more commission as they go along. Now, there are programs out there. I'm not necessarily a fan of those programs because I don't think guidelines or goals are set up correctly necessarily, to where it's, you have to sell $30,000 a quarter. And if you don't sell that $30,000 a quarter, and let's say you're 10 shy, the next quarter, in order to make your full commission, you owe me $40,000. Right? Like I think that's a negative driver for the salesperson, because in the end, what you're wanting them to keep up the activity you want. Right. And not get lazy from a standpoint of, and I've had this, right? And luckily he wasn't a lazy salesperson, but that guy would sell his yearly goal in a quarter every year, guarantee you. But he wasn't lazy. So you knew the multipliers that you gave him, if you sell this much, your commission is 100% of X. Yep. If you sell this much, you get 110 or 120 or whatever it is. And you just set these goals that as they're hitting their goals, and that's where the coin operation comes in, right? And it's one of those things where their activity keeps them driving because they're trying to do that.
Yep. And if you get a hold of a good hunter, right, those types of small base, more commission with accelerators I think are key because it incentivizes them to overachieve. And if you really have a hunter that is truly coin operated, they are going to hurt you with those accelerators. But as long as you design it correctly, if they hit those accelerators, you're doing really, really well.
Yeah. And that's the thing is and when you're looking at those checks and you're like, okay, I promised the other half we go to Italy this year, but we're only going to be able to go to the Bahamas. Write that check, because the second year you're going to spend a month in Italy instead of 2 weeks.
Correct.
Right. So have that long-term plan. The other thing is properly setting a goal. And let's talk about this for a minute, because I've seen it at just about every MSP there is, especially the younger or the not so mature. If your average growth rate is 10% and you bring in a salesperson, there should definitely be an uptick in what your growth rate is. 30% is not it. If you have never achieved 30%, what makes you think you're going to get to 30%? Because even bringing in a new person, you know pretty much for 90 days there's nothing, or maybe you'll get a small spike up front and then there's nothing for 90 days, right? What data leads you to believe that you're going to make a 20% jump in a year? So I'm not saying that our goals, we can use SMART goals, we can use BHAG, we can use any flavor of combination you want. But if the data doesn't prove in some form or fashion that you can do it, and the goal width is in reach, but it's just uncomfortable out of reach, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if I set that 30% goal, and I've got 5% that goes out the back door because I was so worried about incoming new clients, I didn't take care of my current clients, then that's a big thing. So setting that goal correctly, right, achievable, and then setting a commission structure based on how to achieve that goal, I think is critical from the point too, because you don't want to set someone up for failure the minute they come in.
Yep. And there's going to be some learning that happens in their first year, right? We talked about this when we talked about sales funnels in the kickoff call. We talked about how you can set some industry standards across your sales funnel in terms of conversion rates, right? But you're not truly going to understand what your conversion rates are until some time has passed and you've actually seen things go through your funnel. Same thing with your sales hire. You're not going to know what they're actually capable of until they've put probably almost a year into it.
And understand there's data out there that you can use in your position, but that data isn't specific to your position, right? So I was consulting with the company, and they were coming back and saying, well, these are all the statistics that I see out of this company. Okay, well, that company is 30 years older than you are. That company has about 30,000 clients. That company sells 35 different avenues of revenue. Using their numbers for your numbers don't make sense. Right. So you can certainly find companies that are close to your size, or I think peer groups are great for this.
Yep.
Right. You get in a right peer group that has people that's just above you, that they've kind of broken through those ceilings that you're looking to get through. Like, they can give you some good numbers, but in the end, you need to make sure that you're collecting the data on your own activity so that year 2, year 3, year 5, you're making good decisions based on data true to your company, not true to a company that, quite honestly, in no way reflects who you are or what you're doing.
Yep. Well, Tim, I think we've given them a lot to think about, a lot of actionable items for them to take back and start looking at whether or not it's time to hire a salesperson, how to do some of the math leading up to hiring that salesperson. And then, once you are actually getting them on board, how to create the appropriate compensation plan for how they're going to operate and contribute to the business.
Absolutely. And keep in mind too, that that's a joint program, right? That's not, you don't have to do it on your own. Certainly talk to them, right? Because that's a conversation. I would be weary when I hired salespeople. I'm weary of anybody that's not willing to prove themselves. When I hired techs, I'm weary of anybody that's not willing to prove themselves. right? Here's a 90-day bump. Here's a incentive to do X and Y, all based on relationships where they came in and was like, I know what I can do. You just need to sit back and allow me somewhere to hand over all these contracts. Like if you get that kind of a salesperson where they're willing to come in and prove to you what they can do in a ramp up situation or something that's beneficial to you, then that's certainly a conversation that can help a new company looking at that first hire to get them on board to start making some forward progress.
Absolutely. All right, Tim, if people want to reach out to you for some more personalized advice, where can they find you?
The two easiest places to find me is always on LinkedIn. So Tim Coach at LinkedIn or Tim Coach on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. I'm probably wearing a pink shirt or something, so I'm hard to miss. And then the other one is Third Power Consulting, which is also on LinkedIn. If you go to Tim Coach, you'll get it either way. So Tim, last name's Coach, like an athletic coach, or the purse, depending on which one you like the best. That's the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. And likewise, if you guys have any questions for me, please reach out. I'm as findable on LinkedIn as Tim is, although I don't have a pink jacket, although I have been known to dress up on occasion.
On an occasion.
On an occasion.
Like if you don't just kind of dress up, you go all in.
There may have been a sparkly green suit at Last Channel Con. Anyway, thanks, Tim, for joining me. Now, this is the end of our sessions on the MSP sales funnel. If you're a vendor and you're watching this, stay tuned because we have more episodes coming up specific to your sales funnel.